In this video, we're breaking down the best possible party compositions in Final Fantasy Tactics, the Ivalice Chronicles, for every stage of the game, from early, mid, to late game, breaking down which jobs or characters you want on your team and why. That's because having a balanced party that can heal, deal damage, and debuff enemies is critical at literally every stage of the game, and having that balanced party will make the game that much easier. Now, generally speaking, in Final Fantasy Tactics, you can control up to 5 units in battle, not including guest characters, of course, or temporary allies that you might get throughout the storyline. And while you can technically run, 5 summoners or 5 monks at a time, if you do that, you're actually going to struggle without a balanced mix of offense, defense, utility, and support. Now, in terms of roles, or like the typical role that you would want across your party, you have things like tanks. The tank is supposed to absorb damage and also control enemy movement. Great jobs for a tank would be like a monk or a knight, for example. You also typically want a unit that can be a physical DPS, dealing direct damage, usually up close to enemies, something like a monk, a knight, a ninja, or the thief. Now, you also want to invest heavily into magic DPS, those units that can cast big AoEs or high damage spells from range, typically your black mage or your summoner. Next, some type of support or healing unit. These should be available to buff your allies, remove debuffs, and restore HP and MP, typically being the white mage, time mage, or the mystic. Finally, you'll want some type of utility, either through mobility options, status effects, or map control. You could think of the orator or the mystic job for this role. Now, a strong party usually includes at least one of each of those role types, with some flexibility, depending on your choice for Ramza and what particular story battle you're coming up against. Speaking of story, let's dive into a little more about each chapter and what types of parties work best in each of those cases. Chapter 1, that's basically your foundation, where you'll want to focus more on survivability. So the best early game party in Chapter 1 will have a variety of jobs that can do something on each and every turn to grow your characters. For instance, Squire can learn Focus, which allows you to earn JP, even if you can't attack a target on that particular turn. Chemists are also important because you can use items and, again, grow your job points. This is dramatically going to increase the speed in which you gain JP for your party overall. So when you very first start the game, make sure that each character unlocks items, specifically potions and Phoenix Down. That also greatly increases your survivability with being able to heal yourself or other characters, as well as revive them. You should do that as soon as possible. The Knight is also a great tank class at this early point in the game, as well as archers for ranged damage to be able to snipe down mages on the enemy team. A white mage at this point, combined with items from the chemist, is going to be a great all-around support build, along with a black mage for AoE damage. Breaking down the Chapter 1 party, we're going to start with Ramza, starting as a squire and ideally progressing towards monk. You could move to knight first, then quickly to monk to learn chakra and revive, so you can heal and still do big damage at the same time. Abilities like movement +1, counter tackle, JP boost, and focus should be your priorities to pick up before progressing to the monk. To support Ramza, you'll want a chemist and white mage combo. This will be your core healer to keep your team alive with instant healing from items and revives. You could even swap in the black mage for some extra damage along with your chemist. Speaking of which, having that black mage on your team early on is pretty essential in terms of increasing your damage, specifically AoE damage and elemental magic early on. For extra survival, you could pair the black mage, as we said, with a chemist and use throw items as your secondary ability for some ranged healing and support. We do recommend you pick up an archer for this early party as well, with either aim +1 or aim +2. This will give you some solid range damage when you need it, and you can eventually level up to the thief to steal items and equipment if you want. Finally, a heavy melee knight is often a good choice early on to help absorb damage, and you can eventually progress the knight towards the monk to have another physical damage dealer towards the mid. But the key here in Chapter 1 is to take your time and progress your characters, learning the best abilities on all of them. This includes abilities from both the Squire and the Chemist job right away. Make sure, again, that you learn Potion and Phoenix Down with all of your characters on the Chemist. This will give them the ability to heal themselves or even resurrect allies without using white magic. Squires should learn Focus, Stone, and Movement +1 for a little bit of extra mobility, but most importantly, the JP boost skill to help grinding out future jobs that much easier. Moving on to Chapter 2 next. During the second chapter, you want to focus on more advanced classes. You can also consider grinding a few, like the Archer or Mystic, so you don't have to field them in story modes. Don't overlevel and spend countless hours grinding here though, because random battles will continue to scale with your level, becoming more challenging. However, you do want to spend 1 to 2 battles per each story event to reach higher level with jobs and unlock better abilities. This is particularly true with advanced jobs like the ninja, where you can unlock dual wield for even more damage. But the best overall jobs in this chapter are the monk for melee units and time mage or summoner for your spellcasters. The monk not only does great damage, but they also have tons of utility, they're able to heal themselves and revive allies. Plus the monk has some range and buffs, so you can always do something every turn. You can even pair the monk with the squire fundaments like focus to use when grinding. And for your range damage dealers, start shifting to higher powered jobs, like we said, including the time mage and the summoner here. The time mage will help you buff and debuff the battlefield. Haste is especially useful for attacking more frequently. Compare the time mage with the white mage earlier for healing and support. This is a really nice combo. Next, the summoner is a huge AoE damage dealer. You can either pair it with the black mage or also use items if you need someone with a bit of extra off healing or resources. Keep in mind though, their magic cost is high, so you do need a secondary job that doesn't require a lot of magic each turn. For our chapter 2 party, again starting with Ramza, you want to be progressing towards monk with your squire for support abilities like tailwind. You can start to save up for more expensive reaction abilities here, like first strike from the monk, and even grind for a bit to get movement +2 on the thief. This is well worth it. Basically, you just want to optimize Ramza with better reactions, better support, and movement abilities during this part of the game to help you out later on. As a physical damage dealer, make sure you have a secondary monk on your group. Not only do they deal tons of damage, but as we said, they can also heal and revive allies with their additional monk skills. Eventually, you can replace this secondary monk with a special character, Agrius, for example, at the end of Chapter 2, who can stay with you permanently after that. Your third party member should be a time mage with access to haste, slow, and eventually teleport, making them incredibly useful and mobile. For your secondary ability set on the time mage, either black mage for more offensive power, white mage for more healing, or even items from the chemist. For your fourth slot, the summoner job with those powerful AoE nukes and utilities through summons like Moogle and Golem. If you have 2 monks on your party, don't worry about using white mage here on the summoner. It's best to have time mage and haste as your secondary ability slot if you can. The most important thing for the summoner is sticking with the time mage long enough to learn swift spell. Otherwise, your summons can take too long to cast and will be less effective. For the flex unit here in the 5th spot, a thief can be a great option with the ability to steal from enemies or charm. Moving on to Chapter 3 with Agrius fully embedded in your party, you can focus on more advanced jobs, while also filling out your support, reaction, and movement abilities. An example of this would be to learn the majority of the monk's abilities, then progress to ninja, specifically for Ramza. With ninja as Ramza's main job, plus martial arts as a secondary, you'll have an extremely strong build that can deal tons of damage with dual wield, but also support the party with heals and revives. Movement +2 from the thief, attack boost from the geomancer, and first strike from the monk are all excellent abilities you should unlock at this time, and this build for Ramza is basically great all the way up until endgame, where you can further min-max your gear, maybe pick up movement +3. If you'd like to see more on this Ramza build, we do have a full guide for the Ramza build. You can check a link for that below as well. But in terms of the Chapter 3 party breakdown, you have Ramza as your ninja/monk, we already talked about that. Agrius as the Holy Knight is going to be a durable off-tank option with status-inflicting sword strikes. Spend this time to get some more useful secondary abilities. Also movement +2 and first strike. If you do this, she'll be set for the entire game basically. So spend time grinding and get JP boost as soon as possible from her Holy Knight abilities. For your third party member, a time mage/white mage combo here is best. This will be your main support character. And you want to spend some time learning offensive spells too, so you can deal damage as well when nobody needs the extra healing. Meteor, for example, from the Time Mage, and Holy from the White Mage are amazing damage-dealing spells, giving you full access to healing, debuffs, buffs, and powerful AoEs all in one build. The Summoner Black Mage should continue here. Use the Summoner and another job in secondary for your major AoE damage. You could do Black Mage if you learned Flare and Toad. These two are great options for single target abilities. If not, you could go with the Time Mage here as well for those buffs, or consider items and throw items specifically if you want this character more for support. For your flex spot here, you can progress the Thief into the Ninja for more damage, plus giving you still access to those supporting skills like Poach, for example, letting you find powerful items. You can also bring this combo into boss fights where you can get some of the most powerful gear in the game directly by stealing from enemies. Moving on to Chapter 4 next, the late game party composition strategy here is just to take the most overpowered jobs possible for both melee and range. You want diversity in your party leading into Chapter 4 and the Deep Dungeon. For Ramza, at this point, you can transition to Gallant Knight. If you get hit by Ultimate in Chapter 3, you can cast that spell as well. So a more tanky option here would be to play Ramza as the Gallant Knight, with your monk job for support and healing. If you want a more offensive option for Ramza, a little bit more gear dependent, you can primary the ninja and use monk as secondary here. Ramza will do insane damage, but be a little bit squishier depending on the gear that you have access to. Chapter 4 brings you Orlando, by far the strongest character in the game. So just like you did with Agrius, spend some time here unlocking his better reaction, support, and movement abilities. It can be annoying to spend those few battles grinding, but getting him movement +2 from the Thief is also well worth it. Not to mention attack boost from the Geomancer. Once you have the basics unlocked here, a good reaction like Auto Potion or First Strike is recommended, and then just set him back to Sword Saint and destroy the entire game basically. You can keep Agrius on your team and spend time to get better reactions and movement abilities if you have time. Agrius won't be as good as Orlando, but she will be close enough with ranged AoE damage and access to tons of gear options. For your 4th position, stick with Summoner/Time Mage. This is going to provide massive AoE damage with buffs and debuffs. You could swap in Chemist items for some simple healing and MP restoration if needed. And if you want to save time, you can even skip Teleport here in favor of movement +2 from the Thief. Finally, make sure to have a Time Mage and White Mage support build that has unlocked Meteor and Holy from each of those jobs, so you have access to huge firepower in addition to your support abilities, and maybe unlock Teleport here if you have time. One note on flexibility here, since your special characters are so powerful, at this point in the story, you really don't want to drop them. So if you need a character to do Thief, for example, you'd probably want to slot that on Ramza as a secondary job. So just keep that in mind for some extra flexibility on this setup. Finally, we can talk about the Deep Dungeon. This is where all the best gear in the game drops, but it is a lot more challenging. Expect heavy AoE fights, so spellcasters tend to do very well here, or basically any character with access to AoE damage. For our suggested Deep Dungeon party, Ramza should be Ninja/Monk. Duweld plus Chakra here really makes him self-sustaining. Typically, Ramza would also have Treasure Hunter, plus some boots that grant jump and movement bonuses. That way you can use him to find tiles to collect that endgame gear. Note here that to get treasures more reliably, you do need somebody with a low Brave stat. That's not going to be Ramza in this case, though you can cheese this a bit by using an Orator to debuff a unit that you recruited from the Warriors Guild. You can give that same unit Treasure Hunter and drop one character from this squad, have them wait in the back until every enemy except for one has been eliminated, and then use that unit to collect all the gear more successfully. This does take a lot longer, but it is by far the most effective way to farm endgame gear if you want to be more efficient. But in addition to Ramza, Orlando, Sword Saint's still going to be the strongest overall damage dealer on your team. You'll keep Agrius as well, and then work towards the Arithmetician/White Mage combo. The math skill from the Arithmetician gives you instant global casts, allowing you to dominate pretty much everything in the Deep Dungeon. However, this can be very difficult to level, but if done right, you can cast Holy or Erase over the entire map. Generally speaking though, you can stick with Summoner and Time Mage as the combo here, as that'll still give you a lot of heavy hitting AoE damage, and it's a lot simpler to manage. Finally, having the Time Mage, White Mage support build is still good in this case, as long as you have, again, Meteor and Holy to help you nuke down enemies to make things a bit faster. Just make sure to buff on turn 1 and give haste to Agrius to keep her speed up. But that's it in terms of party compositions for beginning all the way to late game. If you'd like to see more details as well as links to all the builds that we talked about in this video, I'll have the written guide linked down below. Make sure to check that out, and thanks again for watching.